Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies that help us live longer, healthier, and more purposeful lives. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, PhD exercise physiologist, joined by my co-host, Corbin Bruton. In today's episode, we're breaking down what we call the 6 pillars of health span and longevity, a comprehensive framework for aging well that goes beyond just living longer. We're talking about living better with energy, clarity, strength, and connection. From physical fitness and nutrition to mental resilience, emotional well-being, social connection, and spiritual purpose, these 6 pillars form the foundation for a life that not only lasts, but thrives. These 6 pillars include exercise and physical activity, maintaining a healthy body composition, eating a nutrient-rich, balanced diet, not smoking, practicing good sleep hygiene, and cultivating purposeful social connections. These aren't just good habits, they're foundational to longevity and vibrant aging. Whether you're looking to add years to your life or life to your years, this conversation is packed with actionable insights, real-life strategies, and a few surprising truths about what it really means to age well.
Armstrong. So I was going back and I was listening to some of the podcast episodes, and I think it was like episode 266, right around there. We actually mentioned the 6 pillars that are important as you age well, and I thought it'd be really cool for us to dive into those.
Yeah, I think we talk about those a lot, and we just kind of allude to them, but I think, and it was actually, I think it was 267 that we kind of promised we would come up with a podcast that would, kind of underscore the 6 pillars. And so I think it's a great topic for us to just kind of dive into and just elaborate on each of those a little bit more. It was funny. I was teaching in the last week of my advanced topics class this term. I played for the students an interview between Matt Caberline from Optispan and Sim Land, who is a longevity, if he consider himself an expert, but he's an influencer in that area and big promoter. And they're having this conversation, and they start talking about the lifestyle things that you need to do for longevity. And I'm counting for my students. I'm putting a finger up at a time as they went through, and they pretty much gave all 6 of our pillars in the conversation. So I got to smile at my students and say, see what I'm telling you? 6 pillars. So what are those 6 pillars that we always talk about?
So we have exercise and physical activity, maintaining a healthy body composition, eating a healthy diet, good sleep hygiene, having a purposeful social connection, and of course, not smoking.
Right. And then not smoking. Well, let's kind of start with that one, because I think that is one that thankfully much more of our population is not smoking. I mean, rates of smokers is down considerably, although I still pass people on the road with their windows down, their little cigarette out the window as they're driving by. Still walk by. I drive to campus. Most mornings, if I hit it right, there's a guy who's taking a smoking break right on the edge of campus, because we're on a smoke-free campus now, which helps to kind of limit the smoking a bit. But, we still have people that are smoking, but it's not quite as much. But, I wonder, do we need to expand our pillars to include alcohol consumption to a certain extent?
Yeah, totally. I think so. Especially just the damage that alcohol can do on the overall aspect of the body, not just the liver, but the muscles, the brain, and then us also talking about epigenetics, that it doesn't just affect you, it can possibly affect your children and your grandchildren in the future. And that yes, I think we should talk about alcohol. Just like smoking is technically legal and alcohol is also legal, is it something that we should be consuming or putting into our body if we're aware of the effects and the impacts that it has?
And I think, I have no problems with alcohol consumption. I consume some alcohol. I have significantly decreased my alcohol consumption. And again, I was never a heavy drinker. So when I say I significantly decreased, I basically I'm down to maybe 2 glasses of wine or 2 beers a week. And that's an average, which means sometimes it's a little bit less than that. Rarely anymore is it more than that. But, as we also talk about alcohol, we could also lump alcohol within the eating a healthy diet and in the sleep hygiene aspect as well, because we know alcohol has a lot of empty calories. It is going to impact our metabolism to a certain extent, but it also impacts our sleep. And so if we are going to have alcohol, we want it to be, few, maybe 1, 2 small drinks on a daily basis, ideally not a daily basis, but no more than 2 drinks a day. And it should be consumed in a good period of time prior to sleep, because the closer it gets to bedtime, the more it's going to disrupt our sleep hygiene. And I actually had a student this week that pointed out in class that he'd come across somewhere on the internet. And I had not formally heard this rule before, although probably heard it indirectly, but he talked about the 3-2-1 rule for sleep hygiene. And it's like, don't eat after 3 hours before bedtime. Don't drink, and by drink he meant fluids. Don't drink fluids 2 hours before bedtime, and then start to turn down the lights, turn off electronics and all that an hour before bedtime. So that 3-2-1. And I would put in that 3-hour rule. Stop, don't consume alcohol within 3 hours of bedtime. And I know that's really, really hard. But if we're going to stop eating at dinner time, at 3 hours before bedtime, that 3-hour window is a good time to don't drink after you're done eating your dinner. We don't need a nightcap. We don't need to be out hanging out the bar until 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, drinking alcohol. We want to, if we're going to have it for more relaxed social purposes. So again, it kind of ties into the purposeful social connections. So I think kind of alcohol, as we talk about that, really kind of underlies all the other, the 6 pillars that we talk about. Even smoking. I mean, if I know people that will tell me I only smoke when I go out to the bars. And this was a little bit more so before they really banned indoor smoking, because people would get into bars and people be smoking and they get that kind of hint of nicotine, and it would just trigger their compulsion to consume the nicotine. And so I guess alcohol doesn't need to be its own pillar. So which one do you want to do first? I guess we did smoking. We did smoking already. So that's an easy one. Don't smoke. If you smoke,
Don't
stop.
smoke.
Yeah. There's no conversation about that. Just don't smoke. And if you're listening and you do smoke, we're not putting down smokers. We understand that it is a very, very hard habit to break. And that's why don't start. And there are young people listening. Don't start. If you're already smoking, stop.
What if there is a listener though, and they're like, well, actually, there's a lot of, literature out there that's saying that the nicotine portion of cigarettes and smoking actually has cognitive benefits. And they're just trying to be argumentative as you're telling them not to smoke. And they're like, well, actually, there is one benefit. How would you respond in that?
Well, it's like, you can make the argument that nicotine is a brain stimulant, but that what comes along with that nicotine, even if you say, okay, well, I'm not going to smoke, I'm just going to put a nicotine patch on, or I'm going to vape, and like vaping is supposed to be any healthier. But, you talk about a gateway drug. Nicotine is going to be a gateway drug to tobacco use, because you're going to be craving it and it's going to be a way that you can get it. And there are far too many secondary health issues that come along with cigarette smoking, tobacco use. And when I talk about smoking, I always my dad smoked a pipe and occasional cigars and insisted that he was a non-smoker. Dad, you're smoking. You might not be inhaling directly from the cigar or the pipe. It's going into your oral cavity, which there's an opportunity for cancer to be initiated within the oral cavity just from doing that. You're not sucking it down into the lungs, but what air are you breathing between those puffs on the cigar? You're breathing the air around you. And what's in that air? All that residual smoke that you just blew out. So you're smoking. You're just not smoking as intensely as somebody who's, smoking a cigarette.
Just picture him smoking a pipe right now. That's such a rarity to see in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Indubitably, yes. I would say let's just dive into what I would think would be debatably one of the second easiest one, which is exercise and physical activity. That's what I would like.
Okay. So again, it's just getting moving. We want to overcomplicate exercise and physical activity when it comes to aging well. And the majority of Americans are not even hitting the minimum guidelines for physical activity that are kind of laid out by the American College of Sports Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only, like 300 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity. That's just walking. I mean, which means it's probably not hitting your 10,000 steps a day. We're sitting on our butts far more of the day and not getting up and moving around. And if we can just begin to get up and move, that's going to take us a step closer, no pun intended there, but a step closer to getting healthier and just taking more steps. And there's simple things that we can do to increase that. And think of like exercise snacking, 5 minutes here or there, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, walking a little bit farther from, where you park your car a little bit farther away from the grocery store or work or whatever, so that we have to walk. I always talk to my students about the 100 kilocalorie rule. That's a very general rule of thumb. It's 100 kilocalories per mile, whether you walk, jog, or run. That's based off of kind of a more average size individual. So I think it's like 70 kilogram individual. So someone like myself, over 220, close to 230 pounds, I'm going to be expending a lot more calories walking that distance. But, if I just 100's an easy number to remember. If I park a quarter mile further away from a building and walk that quarter mile from my car to the building and then have to walk back as I leave, that's a half mile. That's 50 kilocalories right there. Right. That adds up, and you do that a couple times a day, a few times a week, you're adding up calories that you're expending that you wouldn't otherwise have expended. And then we can start talking about, okay, well, let's get into formal exercise. What should we be doing and what shouldn't we be doing? And what would you prioritize for overall health and longevity when it comes to exercise? If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast.
Resistance training, by far. Just resistance training is what I would prioritize as far as strengthening bones, strengthening your muscles, not just for physical strength, such as carrying things, but also helping with your balance and stability as well. I think in the long run, prioritizing resistance training, it's so simple. You can read thousands of literature out there, and they will all back up what we're saying, that prioritizing resistance training is going to be far more beneficial than prioritizing cardiovascular, your typical running and jogging and all that. Focus on the resistance training and lifting heavy. That's also what you would prioritize. Not to sacrifice your form. If you can't lift heavy yet, just stick with body weights, but eventually the goal is to improve so much that you are lifting heavier and you're adding that resistance. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think we have to underscore what heavy means. A lot of people think, well, I can't lift heavy. I can't squat 500 pounds. Well, you don't need to squat 500 pounds for it to be heavy for you. If 100 pounds is heavy for you, meaning that you can only do 3 to 5 repetitions of that 100 pounds, that's heavy for you. And you just keep progressing and lifting heavier and heavier. We don't want to, be that person who goes to the gym, picks up the 5-pound dumbbells and spends, 5 years at the gym using that same weight. You want to progress from there. If it's heavy for you at the start of the exercise, great. Keep adding weight to progressive overload. And eventually you'll get stronger and stronger. And I think there's a misconception among the older population that when you hit a certain age, you got to stop lifting heavy. And there's a certain bit of truth to that in that, we have to be a bit more cautious about our joints and our stability and whatnot. But heavy is relative. And if I'm a power lifter in my 30s and I hit in my 40s and 50s, I might not want to continue to be lifting those big, heavy weights, because that's going to be an undue stress on my body and it's not essential. But if I can cut that a little bit and then maintain, if I can deadlift 400 pounds, that's pretty functional. You're going to be able to do a lot of activity. It's not going to prevent you from doing activity. I've really been leaning into the Zercher squat a lot more, as you are well aware. My students, I think a few of them in their recent projects were all mentioning the Zercher squats because they thought it garnered them some favor with the professor. But I think if I can only do one lift, I'm going to do the Zercher squat because it captures so much of the body. And I think I did about a 4 or 5 week kind of high volume Zercher squat training cycle here just recently. And I started relatively light, 10 sets of 10, started with just 135 pounds on the bar, was relatively light, added 10 pounds every workout, kind of concluded that cycle with 10 sets at 300 pounds. And I'm 62. And I felt better. I feel like my muscle mass increased over that period of time. Now, I'm not going to continue that for a long, long period of time. I'm done with it. I'm going to cycle into something else. But that particular lift, I just felt like even my bench press felt stronger, and I have a lot of shoulder issues. I felt my bench press was much more stable because the back strength that I had gained from doing that enabled me to stabilize my shoulders a bit more effectively. And so it doesn't take a lot in terms of the strengthening exercises. We talk often about our basic 5. I know you like to extend that to the superior 7. We're not going to go down that route today, but if we're doing basically a squat, a hip hinge, a horizontal press, like a bench press, an overhead press, or some shoulder exercises, and a rowing exercise, you're covering your bases. It doesn't take long, and you're going to maintain a level of strength and functionality that then is going to carry over to you being able to maintain your cardiovascular fitness much better.
Yeah, nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Also, I kind of want to go back to your baby steps as far as being physically active. I would say with us rolling into summertime right now, having people just add it as part of their daily routine to after their last meal, if they have the luxury of living in a neighborhood where they can walk around, I would say just go on a walk, go on like a little 30, 45-minute walk right after that last meal. One, you're going to help regulate insulin levels. And then 2, you're getting your steps in. 3, it's so unbelievably you relieve so much stress after like a long hectic day at work, and you just kind of walk around your neighborhood as the sun is still out and you're getting that sun and the birds are out and you're hearing the chirping, but that smell of summer is in the air. It's awesome. I've been totally taking advantage of that myself, and it's amazing. Plus, it's not so hot out that you're not burning your dog's feet if you want to take your dog on a walk.
Well, I was going to say, if you have a dog, then increasing the walking of the dog is going to give you more physical activity. I heard somebody comment recently that, you see a fat dog, you're going to see a fat dog owner, because the dog's not getting the exercise. That means they're not getting the exercise. So yeah, just getting out moving, find excuses to move. And that's all we really need to do. Our pillar is exercise and physical activity. Physical activity is just getting your butt up out of the chair and moving. And the more we can lean that into exercise, ranging from low moderate intensity cardiovascular activity up to more intensive strength training, the better we're going to be overall.
All right, I think the next one is a perfect segue, talking about that movement and fat dogs. I think maintaining a healthy body composition would be great to hop into our next pillar.
Yeah, and I think it always has to be a little bit of caution as you start talking about body composition and healthy body composition. And I underscore healthy, because a lot of people immediately go to, if you start talking about body composition, they start talking, you're fat shaming, I'm comfortable at my weight, I feel healthy at my weight, which I'm going to go on the record here saying, if you are morbidly obese and you feel healthy, you're in denial. You're just not, there's no way you're healthy. There's far more problems that go along with that. Does that mean you have to have 6-pack abs? I think if you got 6-pack abs in many cases, unless you're like so genetically predisposed to those, you're at an unhealthy body composition. So that healthy body composition is really in that range where you got a little bit of fat on you. Maybe you want to lose a little bit to go to the beach, but you don't have to lose a lot. You're comfortable in your weight. You're able to eat a healthy diet, so you're not depriving yourself, but you're also not overeating. So healthy body composition is probably, if we start looking at BMI, it's actually a BMI that's a little bit on the higher side. I would say it's probably somewhere between 23 to 26, maybe even 27 for BMI. And BMI, for those who are listening or might not be aware, is basically your body weight in kilograms divided by your height in centimeters, or height in meters squared. And so, 25 is actually considered to be overweight, and then 30 is considered obese. But at 25, I have no desire to have my BMI below 25, because I know if I go below 25, based on my height and my body type, I'm going to be under muscled more likely.
Now, does it matter the percentage based off of male versus female, or is it just 25, 30 across?
Well, that's the interesting thing. You don't see any differentiation between males and females when they talk about BMI. Now, females possibly might even need to have a slightly higher BMI than males, because they do need a little bit more body fat, or naturally have a little bit more body fat than males, but they also have a little less muscle mass. So, it's kind of an awkward number. And that's why I hate the BMI, because it doesn't tell you anything about the body composition. And so you may have a woman who is very muscled compared to a woman who is very fat, and they might have the same BMI. Do they have the same health? Probably not. And so you really want to look at, okay, how much, my goal should be to add muscle. And so by adding muscle, my body weight goes up, and it's because of muscle mass. My percent body fat's going down. So I'm becoming healthier. If I lose weight, but don't lose muscle mass, now my weight goes down, my body composition is going down. But if my weight stays the same and I'm losing muscle mass as I age, I'm not staying healthy. I'm getting more and more unhealthy. And that kind of leans into what we talked about in episode 367, I believe it was, that, you can become increasingly skinny fat and become metabolically sick. And so we want more muscle mass to favor that healthier metabolic system.
What stinks about this is certain individuals, for their job, they have open enrollments here, and it's to determine what kind of insurance you're going to have, and is your insurance going to properly cover you? And you have to put in your height and your weight, which then determines the BMI. And then if you're in the green zone, then you're fine. But if you're in the red zone, then you're not fine, which, like you said, that 25% range, you're closer to that red zone. And that just seems like a flawed system, personally, especially since BMI, for lack of the better word, it's kind of irrelevant. Kind of doesn't really matter. There's got to be a better, more efficient way where we can justify an individual.
Well, I think an easy way would just be for healthcare systems to offer and to your insurance companies pay for an annual DEXA scan. Because the DEXA scan is going to give you, full body bone mineral density, tell you how much muscle mass you have and how much fat mass you have. Right. I mean, it's probably one of the best indicators, and it's relatively, maybe every year isn't as good because there's a level of radiation that you get with that, but it's a pretty low level, and there are some very strong health benefits that we can get from knowing what our body composition really is, not just going by, okay, the chart says that you are over fat. It's like, okay, yeah, but your BMI is lower than me, doctor, and you don't look near as healthy as I do.
Right.
Let's have a squat competition and see. So body composition is something that we really have to consider. And, I grew up with the old Special K pinch an inch. I don't know if you've ever saw those commercials, but if you could pinch an inch of fat at your belly, then you needed Special K cereal. Now, I'm not recommending that, so you go on a Special K diet to lose weight. There are healthier diets out there, but, we can tell where our body fat is, just by kind of monitoring, just kind of pinching how much belly fat we have. And, if that number is growing, then we're getting less and less healthy. Decreasing, then we're getting healthier. And if there's really nothing there, well, we have to consider, is it too low or is it okay?
Gotcha. Well, I think in order to maintain that healthy body weight, also, we need to focus on eating healthy. So what a perfect segue to our next pillar of eating a healthy diet.
Yeah, and eating healthy.
About this. Oh, go for it. Go. Sorry.
I was just going to say, eating a healthy diet is important, and it leads into those other areas. I mean, it's going to fuel the body for the physical activity. It's going to help us to maintain a healthy body composition. But there's even that more important now, building into the nutrients. I always teach my students that about 50% of weight management, success in weight management is going to come from caloric balance. And then you get in about 30% is going to be your macro balance, which kind of takes us from the healthy body composition now more to the healthier eating and a more nutrient-rich, balanced diet. What were you going to say? Because I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just going to say, now we've talked a lot about what kind of healthy diets are, our choice, such as the Mediterranean and the Nordic diet. But are there any other diets that you could potentially recommend, or is it just going to be just those two? And I ask because there's so many, especially on social media and all these other trends, there's such a push for all these different types of diets. And, a lot of them are actually debatably backed up by science, and some of them have social media doctors that are kind of pushing leading the charge and pushing that information that's out there. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I actually drew this on the whiteboard the other day in class, where I had kind of on the far left, I drew the 100% sugar diet, which I actually had a friend in grad school. He was in a master's program when I was working on my PhD. It was a distance runner and had a horrible diet. I mean, he literally like jelly on white bread, and he would buy boxes of macaroni and cheese and throw away the quote unquote cheese. That's not real cheese that they put in those things. And then just, boil and eat the macaroni. I mean, pure low grade carb diet. And he was losing teeth and wondering why. I mean, he just had tons of health issues with it. And like, dude, you have to eat, other than just sugary carbs. And so, you can have that pure sugar diet. And then on the right side of the board, I put out, pure carnivore. And, the thing is funny with, people that say they're pure carnivore, it's like, do you season your meat? Because that seasoning has got some carbs in it, so you're not purely carnivore. You're not, carnivore is, you tackle the gazelle, you rip it open and you start eating it. It's raw meat, no spices, no cooking whatsoever. And so we have this really wide continuum. And then there's so many different diets that fall within that. And, there's principles that we should be driven by in terms of what decisions we make. I think there's a very strong gray area between a healthy, say, Mediterranean Nordic diet and a purely vegetarian diet. Mm-hmm. I think a challenge with a vegetarian diet, eating a purely plant-based diet can be challenging for many of us who maybe want more protein or actually like eating meat. And so you can kind of shift away from the vegetarian a little bit into more of a flexitarian diet, which would be one where you are overall eating mostly plant-based foods, but you allow yourself some healthier meats. You generally are avoiding, red meats. You're eating more fish, particularly, healthy fatty fish, maybe chicken. You eat eggs. You have other animal-based protein sources. And then you have your I'm drawing a blank on the name. Eat purely fish, pescatarian, I believe is what it's called. Yeah. And so that's just you eat fish, but that's it. That's the only type of meat you eat. And then you're eating your healthier vegetables, which is a little bit more, it's where you get into all these nuanced different terminologies that are used. To me, I kind of joke that a flexitarian is just somebody that's not willing to commit 100% to a plant-based diet. But the Mediterranean diet is essentially anywhere from a pescatarian to a flexitarian type of diet. They do allow a certain amount of meat, but you can still eat a vegetarian diet within that as well. What you're not going to be eating is a more purely keto or paleo diet or carnivore diet, which really leans more into the meat and fat level. And so I think if we kind of stay in that middle range, if you choose not to eat meat, and many people do that for whatever reasons, but if you're not going to eat meat, you're eating 100% plant-based, you have to be very cognizant of what proteins you're getting. Are you getting enough proteins? Where are you getting those proteins? And I think if we go back to the interview with Louis Burtis talking about, labeling the food is you had whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and nuts, healthy nuts. And eating those, you're going to be getting, especially if you're eating a variety and you're eating them in various combinations, you can get your protein. I would probably also suggest somebody that is eating a purely plant-based diet to supplement with creatine. You need your creatine in order to make sure that we're really topping off that phosphocreatine in the muscle, and the brain also needs creatine. It's important for brain development as well as the aging brain, and it's important for muscle function as well. So maybe supplement with, creatine or branched chain amino acids just to make sure that you're getting, kind of topping off the gas tank a little bit. But otherwise, you can eat a fairly healthy plant-based diet, and it's going to be much more satiating, much more full. He recommended no more than 15% fat in that. And again, being more plant-based fats. So your olive oil, your coconut oil, avocado, that kind of stuff. Nut oils, not necessarily leaning into the beef tallow and some of those fats. And then as we get over kind of into a little bit more of a flexitarian, just making healthier meat choices, trying to limit the red meat. I try and limit red meat a little bit more. It's a bit harder, kind of like a burger once in a while. I like some red meat. If I could, I'm going to lean into buffalo as my red meat choice. Very healthy
elk.
meat. Yeah. And so, just try and make the healthier choices with those. Lewis recommended, if you're going to eat meat, then try and go for an 80-20 break, where it's about 80% of your diet is plant-based, 20% is going to be healthier meats. So when you fill up your plate, palm size amount of meat on the plate, and then fill in the rest with very healthy vegetables is going to be the way to go. And we look at Nordic diet versus the Mediterranean diet. It's really just the difference in the food items that are going to be included in the diet. What's regionally and sustainably available where you are living is going to be the healthier approach. So again, we go back to, the whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains, the nuts and legumes. Which of those are available in your area? The Nordic diet tends to favor a little bit more roots because of the environment there. Mediterranean's probably favoring a bit more legumes. But, eat those style of diets within your cultural norm. If you're, growing up in a Hispanic family and, kind of Mexican food is your normal food, there are choices that you can make. I mean, obviously beans are a big component of that, tortillas, rice. There's plenty of foods that you can eat that are going to be similar without, making the food unhealthy. We look at various Asian cuisines or Mediterranean cuisines other than like the Greek, Italian, that kind of stuff. They're all unique, but they all follow kind of some of the same basic principles.
It's kind of hard to say. There's a lot of, I'm actually for more red meat. I know you're not, but like everything else, as far as getting your veggies in and your fruit, I'm all on board with that. I do believe that we need to get fish in. I do believe that we need to get our leaner meats, our white meats like turkey and chicken, and actually quail is phenomenal too. But I also am an advocate for red meats. Maybe not necessarily beef as one would think, but your elk, your bison, your even lamb. I really like lamb. It's really good, and it's super high in omegas. It's one of the only land mammals that have a high level of omega-3 in there. Pretty good. I like it. I like lamb.
Yeah,
it's an acquired taste, but
I think you have to be careful in advocating for a higher red meat diet because most people, when they associate red meat, they're going to associate it with cattle, with beef cattle. And
well, there's a difference, right? Because when I was in Costa Rica, they have Brahma cattle for their. So we have a different style beef here in America. We have that cattle, whatever you're picturing right now on the Yellowstone Ranch. That's what we have as our main source of beef. But
I wouldn't say the Yellowstone Ranch. I would say probably more like the I don't want to pick on any particular state, but the factory beef processing farms, where it's basically cattle that have limited range movement. I mean, you go in the Yellowstone, kind of watching that series, they're much more grass range fed beef. That's healthier beef, but we're talking about this, the kind of corn fed, soy fed, hormone laden beef that is grown, just for the sake of getting the cow as big and as fat as possible. And that is not necessarily healthy red meat. And so we want to look at the quality of the red meat. If you can eat wild game, that's great. I mean, I have family in West Virginia. My sister's husband and my nephews, they get their limit of deer every year, and they have a freezer full of deer. They're getting some healthy meat eating there. But, going to the local grocery store and buying the on sale cheap red meat is probably not necessarily the healthiest choice. Now, do we need to avoid that 100%? I would not make that argument that I'm going to give up a steak once in a while or a hamburger or something like that. But you want to just lean into as healthy a choices as we can afford. That's another thing to consider when we're looking at diet is what is affordable to us that we can get the healthiest amount of nutrients out of the food that we can afford to buy. And for some people, chicken is probably going to be ultimately the cheapest overall meat that you have access to other than hunting. But get what you like, just eat a little bit less of it and eat a little bit more plants and healthier food.
Yeah, speaking of steak, that's what I'm going to do for Father's Day. I think I'm going to have my dad over. I think I'm going to get some tomahawk steaks because, you got to treat yourself every now and then. Woo!
Okay, we're talking about eating healthy here. Come
on. All right, let's dive into the next pillar, which we've talked about a good healthy diet. We've talked about maintaining a healthy body weight, and we talked about physical activities. But all of those mean nothing without good sleep.
Right, and I've been kind of telling my students that although we're an exercise science major, sleep hygiene is really starting to kind of creep slightly above the rankings, above exercise and physical activity for importance. Because, again, if we can't exercise if we're not adequately recovered and rested. And we need that rest and recovery in order for the exercise to be effective. And so sleep becomes really kind of a cornerstone piece of these pillars. I know I'm kind of mixing metaphors there with pillars and cornerstones, but hopefully the listeners and the viewers are getting the point that sleep is really, really important. We know, from interviews with like the Kleonskis and other doctors, how critical sleep is to brain health and how, getting quality sleep, getting good REM sleep, getting good deep sleep is important. It's not so much the hours that we are spending in bed. It's the quality of the hours that we're spending in bed. And really, we've been emphasizing quite a bit over the course of the last year of this podcast, the importance of good quality sleep hygiene. And we mentioned earlier the 3-2-1 principle that, stop eating 3 hours before bedtime, stop drinking fluids about 2 hours before bedtime. So that way, you're not going to have to get up too frequently in the night. So you'll be able to sleep more. And then turning off your electronics, dimming the lights, closing the blinds, getting in a dark sleep promoting environment about an hour before sleep. Maybe that's when you read a book, and do things that are going to calm your body, maybe a little bit of meditation, journaling, the things that are calming the mind so that we are prepared now to lay our head down on the pillow and go to sleep.
Yeah. I think I would refer the listeners to the Kleonskis. I think I would also refer them to listen to the episode with Dr. Farrow.
Yeah.
For a long while, we were really interviewing a lot of professionals and a lot of doctors that, that was their area of study. They were a subject matter expert on that. And it was really, really eye-opening, the importance of sleep. Like, you can always be told how important sleep is, but when someone else tells you something that you've heard your whole life, but then breaks down the importance and the actual effects and really shows you the information, so I would recommend that our listeners go back and listen to the episode with the Kleonskis and Dr. Farrow, and maybe you can add someone else that you think would be good in there as well, Dr. Armstrong.
Oh, there's tons of them in there. In terms of some recommendations for just monitoring sleep and recoverability, I would recommend that the readers do get Dr. Farrow says Torkel Farrow, spell it correctly. And we'll leave the name and a link to his book in the description notes. Because the book, The Pulse Cure, I think is a good read. Kind of understand what are we looking for as we're looking into some of the sleep monitors and heart rate variability monitors.
Right.
There's a lot of different options out there. You have the Oura rings, you have the Whoop, you have the Garmin, which is what I use. And then, what information can we get from those? And it's helpful. It can be a little bit overwhelming and a little bit, you can get a little bit overly compulsive about tracking your sleep data, but knowing how we are recovering in our sleep, how much time we're getting in our deep sleep, our REM sleep, how many hours of sleep are we getting can be very critical. I would recommend people get a sleep study done because sleep apnea is much more common than we think. And with that being said, my sleep apnea journey has been quite a frustrating journey for me over the last year. I mean, it was about a year ago that I first considered, that I need to get a sleep study done to see if I have sleep apnea because I am a bit of a snorer, probably more than a bit of a snorer. But I put in a request to my doctor to have a sleep study done and, waited and waited. And finally it was my October checkup. He said, I noted in your notes that you requested a sleep study. Do you still want to do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I wanted to do it like 6 months ago. So it took a couple months to get it actually scheduled to where I was actually able to meet with a sleep specialist, go through all the questionings and things like that. And then they recommended a home sleep study. That took a while to get done because I had to actually go pick up the sleep kit and bring it home and do that study. And it had to be back like immediately the next day. So it was very cumbersome to get that done. And then it was weeks to get the results. And then I got the results and it was a recommendation for a CPAP machine. So then it was weeks before I could get in to get fitted for my CPAP. And then once I got fitted for that, then it was like a good month before the equipment actually came in. And now I've been doing it. I think I'm at about 5 weeks and my sleep scores have sucked. I'm not sleeping well. My overall body battery, which is the Garmin score for heart rate variability, has really been in the toilet most of the nights that I've been using the CPAP. I've only Thursday night, I finally got a score back up in the 80s. You want to score in the hundreds. Today,
that's not good.
No, today was kind of, I think, under 50. But I'm not sure, and I'm waiting to kind of meet with the sleep specialist to get a little bit better reading on what all this means. But it tells me that I have to be very focused on how am I using the CPAP at night? How am I sleeping? What's causing me to get up? And so I'm much more aware of what am I doing? What am I eating? When am I eating? And, just trying to zero in on all that because if we're not recovering well and we're under stress, cortisol levels go through the roof and that presents all kinds of different health issues. And so if you are diagnosed with sleep apnea, you want to get the right equipment that is going to help you to sleep and use it and get used to doing it. It might take some time to actually, get recovery from it and learn how to use the equipment. Maybe, I've gone back and forth trying to figure out what attachment to use. I've tried a nasal pillow, which despite the name, the pillow is actually the one that goes up in the nostrils. The cushion is the one that sits under the nostrils. I'm a nose breather, so the cushion has worked better for me, or I'm a mouth breather rather. So the cushion has worked well for me, but I've had to get a chin strap to keep my mouth shut because I have a tendency to want to, especially if the pressure gets too high, I want to just blow out air. And so, it takes a little bit of practice, takes a little bit of, trial and error and, work on it and get the sleep better. But the key is what are we doing leading up to our sleep and in preparation for our sleep? When we talk about sleep hygiene, it's not having clean sheets. It's about having, the habits that are going to promote our bodies being ready for sleep and getting the best quality of sleep possible. Having a bedtime, having a rising time in the morning, keeping that consistent 7 days a week as much as possible within probably plus or minus a half an hour. Dimming the lights, turning off all the electronics, doing something relaxing in that last hour, again, drinking less fluid going into bed and eating our meals earlier. And that kind of goes back to healthy eating as well, that we're kind of in that more circadian type of intermittent fasting where we're getting our fasting period being longer because we're eating earlier in the day as opposed to eating later in the day. How about you with your CPAP? Have you gotten back on that? I'll put you on the goals here.
Yeah, no. I haven't. I ordered one and then I took out the old because mine got recalled, and then I had to take out that one and put in my new one, and they didn't put the prescription in it. So now I have to go through the process of contacting my doctor and trying to get that prescription program into the actual CPAP itself, and that has been that has been a process in itself. So
Yeah. So why is that? I mean, it's like we want preventative care. We know how important it is to get good quality sleep and how detrimental sleep apnea can be. And yet it is such a slow process. For me with my higher cholesterol, I could be on statins right now, no problem. But it's a process to try and get, the treatment I need to be able to get better sleep, to bring my cortisol down, which I believe is going to ultimately affect my body weight and my hormone levels.
I think you know the answer.
Yeah.
But
So sleep is important. We want to make sure we're getting the best sleep hygiene possible in order to age well. What other pillars? What have we missed? We've talked about.
Last one's the purposeful social connection.
Yeah. And that's one, I think, when you look at the blue zones, that's one of the most common features amongst the people in those blue zones, is that they have very purposeful social connections. And we interject that purposeful in front of social connections because it's having those positive relationships, those, interactions that are going to help us to grow, to be healthy, supportive individuals, not people that are bringing us down and causing us greater amount of stress. These are people that are going to help alleviate our stress and help us to grow into better people, help us to age well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was actually just having this conversation with a couple people, actually, and I'm at the phase of my life where, my personality is I'm a huge social butterfly and I love interaction with people, but I'm also at a phase where I don't want to hang out with people that are going to dull me. You know what I mean? And so I like to have great conversations. I like to be sharp and I like to stay sharp. So if I am around someone who, after I leave with them, I feel like, man, I don't feel sharp. I don't feel I feel like I'm drained completely. Or if I hang out with someone and I feel that I'm doing that with them, I'm just at the phase of my life where I have to make a decision, like, is this working out? And, that's okay. That's okay to make that decision. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry necessarily about, oh, am I going to offend this person or if I'm not? Because you know what? Like, I'm learning life is too short and I feel like certain people will understand. And I like to stay sharp. I like to be sharp. There's that old proverbs that iron sharpens iron. And I don't want to be around individuals that are going to dull me, whether, they're bringing me down mentally or they're bringing me down emotionally or spiritually or whatever the case may be. If I hang out with people or if I go to an event, I shouldn't leave there feeling exhausted and drained. And it's not fun. So I want to be around people that are going to lift me up, that are going to encourage me, that are going to challenge my thought process a bit and make me stay and keep moving me forward. So that's what I like. That's what I need. What thoughts?
Well, you got me thinking about the "What About Bob" movie.
Yeah.
When he talks about, it's just a bad connection. Just hang up the phone.
Right.
And I'm trying to remember that exact quote because that was a pretty funny scene. But yeah, we want to. There's nothing wrong with, maybe we don't want to necessarily delete people from our Facebook page or our social media, but you can kind of mute them so that you're not getting all of their bad energy. When we are socializing, we want to socialize with the people that are bringing us up, bringing us down. And, if you have that friend who's trying to get you to go to the bar instead of the gym, that's not a healthy friend, and so just be purposeful in the relationships. And, it's what are we giving and then what are we getting from the relationship? Because, there's a lot of people that, the idea of purposeful relationships is what can I get out of this relationship? But if it's not a give and take, it's not a healthy relationship either.
Right.
But
Well,
I think
and I think the pillar is a purposeful social connection.
Right.
So you want to be around individuals that you find purpose in, and it may not be individuals per se. It could just be a purposeful activity because having that connection. So maybe you're giving to the community or maybe you're leading a hiking team or whatever the case may be, but you're finding purpose in what it is that you do, and those people around you also have that same or
Yeah,
similar.
we want it to be intergenerational too. That's another aspect of the social connections. And I think Becky Blue in, I forget what episode that was earlier this year, mentioned about, she has a goal of having, friends in every decade of life. I'm not sure how that works for the first decade of life, but I'm sure it's like, helping out with, kids, it's coaching or whatever it might be. But, being connected across the lifespan just feeds it, fuels. And there, as we get older, we want to try and be giving back to the younger community as well, because the kids benefit from being around us as well as we benefit from being around the younger people. I think one of the healthiest things for me as a professor is, I'm always around 20-year-old. And as I get older, my jokes maybe get a little bit more stale or a little bit more outdated, but I keep up with the energy that the younger people have. And I'm able to bring a greater amount of wisdom to them as I get older. And so connections are not just within our age group, because as we age, we're going to start losing those connections much faster than we would like. And if we only have friends that are within our own age group, we're going to get to a point where we're alone. But if we're making friendships across the lifespan, you always have those relationships.
Yeah.
And I think COVID really showed us how important the face-to-face, in-person connections are, and not just the social media connections that we might have with individuals, and having, texting friends back and forth, or your Instagram fanship or whatever they call it, is not social connection. That's a very shallow social connection. We want to be as in-person as possible. I think we need to bring back the front porch. Talk about that a lot in some of the different episodes, where we're outside and interacting much more with our communities and knowing our neighbors better. That is an important part of purposeful social connection. Was there anything we missed in this conversation about the 6 pillars?
No, the only thing I can think of is perhaps, just tying in spies with the 6 pillars as far as spiritual goes, possibly adding a 7th pillar of having a higher power, like having that spiritual faith, because I just think a lot of us can do it on our own. I mean, yeah, some of us have that willpower and some of us have that grit, but where's that grit come from? We were created for a purpose, and then to have that relationship with our creator is just, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I find it awesome because praying is super easy. It's cheap, it's free, and it feels good. It makes your heart feel good. So yeah, just having that relationship.
Well, then I have to do a plug for my We Have a Spiritual Problem podcast as we dive into those different topics. And I would underscore for, somebody that might have just said, well, nope, you lost me there on the God thing. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. That does not discount the purposeful social connection. I think when we talk about purpose, as we put that purpose in the social connections, that implies, again, that spiritual aspect of spies. And again, we got to give a plug out to Jay for coining the spies for our spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social.
Shout out Jay.
Yeah. So he's all happy now. He's going to start wanting royalties for every time we mention spies. But that purpose piece is understanding that we're doing it. These relationships are beyond the self. And, you can get into, and I'm with you in terms of believing in God and the purpose of God. And I'm kind of leaning a lot more into a bigger, more cosmic God, cosmic creator, whatever you want to call it. But as we lean into just simply understanding that there is something that connects us all together, whether we want to call that a God, a higher power, a, force, a source, a, unicorn, I don't know, whatever it might be, it's what's connecting us, joining us all together. And that's one of those very important parts of that purposeful social connections, so the social connection piece to me really kind of brings together that spiritual, physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the social well-centeredness all under like one big umbrella. And so, yeah, I guess if we were to add a 7th pillar, it would have to be just simply spies, having that spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social well-centeredness. I also coined this as the well-centered fitness. It all kind of falls under, and I think maybe the 6 pillars actually act as a support for that, and that is such a key component for aging well.
Aging well.
And I guess maybe we just conclude with that.
Yeah.
With your, if you want to age well, let's focus in on, balancing that well-centered fitness, the SPIs, and underscoring the 6 pillars: the need for physical activity and exercise, the need to eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, have good sleep hygiene, don't smoke, and most importantly, have those good, purposeful social connections. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.